The following review for Rise of the Ronin contains footage and story spoilers for the first 2 hours of gameplay. Japan, 1858. The country is in the midst of significant cultural and economic upheaval as the shogunate seeks to modernize traditional ways and bring Western influence into Japanese society. Opposing them are the anti-shogunate forces intent on keeping the traditions of the old world and expelling foreign invaders who have not only brought their societal differences to Japan, but have also seemingly introduced a cholera epidemic to the country. It is a period of civil unrest, but amongst all of this, we find a lone assassin, once of the Veiled Edge clan, now a Ronin, a masterless warrior, roaming the land on a quest of their own. This is Rise of the Ronin, a new open-world action RPG from PlayStation, Koei Tecmo, and Team Ninja. As this nameless assassin, the player begins by not only defining their own character, but also that of their twin sibling using Team Ninja's usual detailed character creator. These Blade twins were trained by the Veiled Edge from an early age, perfecting their assassin's arts before being sent on a critical mission to infiltrate an American ship, steal a document, and assassinate the Commodore of the American forces. After this mission goes sideways during an encounter with a mysterious blue demon ninja, the player chooses which twin will be Rise of the Ronin's main protagonist, as their sibling seemingly sacrifices themselves to allow their twin to escape with the letter. Years later, as the Veiled Edge clan is attacked by the shogunate forces intent on wiping out those who would oppose the country's transition to new ways by means of a great purge, the protagonist discovers their twin may still be alive. Betraying their master, the now Ronin escapes the Veiled Edge camp and begins their journey to find their missing sibling. As with any good RPG, Rise of the Ronin has a wealth of NPCs to interact with, something that is critical to this very story-driven game. As you find allies both within the pro and anti-shogunate divisions, you will be able to alter the course of the story not only through dialogue choices and interactions, but also through the specific missions you decide to take on. This presents an interesting moral dilemma in some instances, with a branching narrative going in different directions as pro or anti-shogunate forces gain more traction in the overarching story, and can even lock you out of certain mission choices. All of this story plays out in some wonderful cutscenes. This is easily one of the most story-focused open-world games I've played in quite some time, and it's happy to let the player set their controller down for extended periods while it advances that story. Rise of the Ronin's story is also about smaller moments, and you can use conversations with individual characters to expand your wider knowledge of the game world, as well as their own specific motivations, often opening things up in some emotional places. Certain points of conversation will improve your bond with those characters, as will offering them gifts, which will in turn affect the abilities and items you can access in the game, as well as how well those characters will be able to support you in missions. And yes, it wouldn't be a modern RPG without a few romance options, so fans of that can rest assured their Ronin will be able to find time for a little bit of loving in among the action. One thing to note is that some of these NPC interactions do hold access to some items and mechanics which will become fairly key to helping you get through the tougher areas of Rise of the Ronin, and be assured, this can be a tough game at times. So interacting with a character at least once to see what options they open up is highly recommended. In fact, if I could suggest one particular branch of side quests you should invest time in, are those for inventor Igashichi Izuka, a character you meet a couple of hours into the game. You'll thank me later. There's a lot of very rich information to be uncovered in Rise of the Ronin, but thankfully the game stores all of it in a handy encyclopedia which you can call up at any time, including in the middle of conversations, to check names, places, and other things which may be relevant to your current situation.
ちゃんと前向いて歩かんかい。
まあ拾ってくださるなんてお優しい。それでね。
After the game's more linear opening hour, you'll find yourself in the open world, able to largely explore wherever you want. This map isn't as large and imposing as, say, that of Elden Ring or Ghost of Tsushima, and is split into regions around the central city of Yokohama. Initially traversing the rolling countryside, villages and sprawling city streets on foot or horseback, the player will soon get access to the game's earliest gadgets, the grapple hook and the glider. The grapple will allow you to quickly climb large structures and swing off beams, while the glider will allow you to cover distances in the air, making exploration an absolute treat. Obviously, any open world game worth its salt needs to provide the player with plenty to do, and Rise of the Ronin doesn't fall short in that regard. However, instead of spewing icons out onto the map as soon as possible, it chooses to be more selective on the activities it opens up. These activities are plenty and, among other things, can take the form of clearing out pockets of civil unrest, allowing townsfolk to reclaim the land and open up merchant hubs, hunting down fugitives, taking part in training exercises to hone your skills with certain items and weapons, and, most importantly, cats to hunt down and pet. Taking part in these activities will open up more of the map, and clearing out all activities in a given region will level up your affinity to that area, increasing rewards in random encounters and events, as well as reducing prices at merchants. Interacting with Veiled Edge banners scattered around the map, meanwhile, will provide, among other things, fast travel and respawn points around the map, as well as refilling any reusable items in your inventory. Completing many of these activities will earn the player special silver coins, which they can use at special merchants and NPCs to buy rare items, often offering them an opportunity to help boost their level significantly and learn more skills. Meanwhile, the player will also earn regular coins from missions and encounters, which they will use at regular merchants to buy gear and equipment to help them on their quest. Travelling to the city area, the player will also find their longhouse, a hub of sorts where they can rest, interact with NPCs they've met and perform certain customization options, as well as joining and hosting online co-op missions. There are also passive activities to take part in, such as sending off the very good boys known as pilgrim dogs with bags of coins, as well as missions you can send any cats you may have found off to tackle. These missions will net you a random selection of items on their return and are worth dipping into every now and then to bolster your inventory. With secret areas to find, rewarding the player with rare loot, Rise of the Ronin certainly presents plenty of things to do in its open world, most of which are going to involve putting some sort of miscreant to your weapon's blade. Of course, for all the world building, exploration and rich storytelling, an action RPG will live or die by its combat. Thankfully, Rise of the Ronin brings an excellent pedigree to the table and delivers solid, fast-paced action. There is a veritable cornucopia of weapons on offer, and you'll get to pick two to start with after setting up your character, from dual or single katanas to long sweeping weapons like the spear or poleaxe, or, my personal favourite, the long-bladed odachi. Guiding the twins through their opening mission serves as the tutorial to the game's combat mechanics, and for anyone who's tackled Team Ninja's previous games, the Neo series and Wolong Fallen Dynasty, these will be instantly familiar. As you dig deeper, however, you'll find several twists that keep Rise of the Ronin feeling fresh. Square is your standard attack combo with each weapon, with L1 blocking incoming enemy attacks. You can jump with X and dodge and run with circle. Blocking enemy attacks will prevent damage from reaching your character, but will damage your ki meter, this game's representation of stamina. Triangle is Rise of the Ronin's secret sauce in the combat, the counter spark parry, which will damage enemies but is mainly used to deflect their attacks and damage their ki meter, leaving them open for critical attacks. Don't underestimate just how important the counterspark is in Rise of the Ronin's combat. Not only will it be critical to taking down some of the game's more formidable foes, but a well-timed counterspark in response to enemy gunfire will actually buff your blade with fire, something the game actively sets up in many scenarios. R1 combined with square or triangle performs one of two martial attacks unique to each weapon type, which, if they connect, will do big damage to the enemy's health and ki and help you open up those crit opportunities. Enemies can also target you with their own martial attacks, identified by a red flash. These have to be parried or they will damage your own ki and health, opening you up for critical attacks. As with previous Team Ninja action RPGs, ki management is critical. Attacks and dodges will deplete your ki, as will getting hit, but a quick tap of R1 after an attack will partially reset your ki with a blade spark. This feels easier to pull off than the ki pulse in previous games, but as combat relies a lot more on the parry mechanic, it can be trickier to find an opening for resetting your ki. As with Neo and Wolong, the player will also be able to switch to different stances, high, low and medium, which will each be more effective against certain types of enemy during the course of the game. Rise of the Ronin spices this up, however, by presenting different stances for each weapon that can be unlocked by completing certain activities in the world map, as well as boosting your bond with specific NPCs. These not only add a new layer of customizability to your character, but add strategy to the combat as you swap between stances to tackle different enemies, as well as mid-combo to deliver new and devastating attacks. Combat as a whole relies on balancing aggression with defense, watching enemy actions and deciding when to attack, when to block and when to parry. Overcommit to a combo and you're likely to get caught out by an enemy's attack, but rely on defense alone and you'll soon get overwhelmed. It's like a dance. And then there's the aforementioned grapple hook. As well as using the grapple to navigate the game world, it's a powerful tool in combat, allowing you to pull enemies towards you or quickly close distance for a devastating mid-air attack, as well as throw objects such as exploding barrels towards your foes. Mixing the grapple into more blade-based combat lets you zip around the field, dealing damage and darting away, and it's a hugely satisfying addition to Team Ninja's already satisfying scrapping mechanics. As well as the two primary weapons your Ronin can arm themselves with, you also have an array of secondary weapons to choose from, including the usual bows and rifles that will be familiar to Team Ninja veterans, as well as the newly added pistol, which is great for close quarters combat, shuriken and clay pots, which can either be used as distractions or filled with gunpowder to be used as explosives. Rise of the Ronin also rewards stealth, letting you tackle missions using your ninja skills to sneak up on enemies, getting in assassination attacks via ground or in the air using your glider. Many missions reward a stealthy approach, with some even encouraging not killing enemies, allowing you to take wooden weapons in or use your fists to minimise casualties. Individual missions as well can be tackled in a co-op style, taking in up to 2 of the NPCs you've met or bringing in other players via the online features. When playing with NPCs, you can also swap between your main protagonist and any cooperators you have to hand. This will also be done automatically for you should your main character ever run out of health, giving you the opportunity to resuscitate them, and can really help with some clutch victories in tricky boss encounters. As well as combat, the action RPG genre is also synonymous with plenty of exciting loot. Rise of the Ronin is no exception. As with Team Ninja's track record in this area, there are tons of weapons and items to find, randomised in a Diablo-like way and ranked into common, uncommon, rare and legendary tiers. Weapons and armour will come with unique perks to buff your character's abilities, dealing bonus damage, increasing certain attacks, or even offering extra health when equipped. Some armour sets as well will offer bonuses when multiple types are equipped, and the bond transfer ability will allow you to transfer these perks between weapons and armour. There's also other items to find, from medicine that can regenerate your health in combat or give a temporary boost to your attack power or ki, to resins that you can use to coat your weapon in fire or poison, as well as single-use items to give you experience boosts. Fortunately, this isn't as overwhelming as, say, the number of items you can find in a game like Elden Ring, and they provide Rise of the Ronin with a solid amount of options for the player to consider. As you pop open enemies like loot pinatas, however, you will quickly fill your inventory with weapons and armour that you likely won't be using. Thankfully, blacksmiths are on hand in the game's cities and villages to not only level up your gear, but also take what you don't need off your hands. You can either sell them weapons and armour, or if you're looking to improve an existing piece of equipment, you can choose to break them down into crafting materials to help with the process of upgrading your key pieces of gear. Taking time to clear down your inventory in this way will make sure that you have plenty of coins and materials and won't have a million low-level pairs of shoes that you're never going to use. Crafting is also a quintessential part of Rise of the Ronin's open world, and you'll be frequently picking up nuts, berries, bamboo, sticks and other materials when roaming the world. You can use these at apothecaries to make the medicines and resins you need to keep your character's key gear in stock, saving your important coin for other tasks. You can also learn new recipes and will very quickly have access to craft many of the important items in the game. Anyone into the fashion game will also have a great time in Rise of the Ronin, as you can fully tailor your character's look independently of the gear that they are wearing. This is easily one of the best transmog mechanics I've seen in a game like this. Anytime you find a new piece of gear, you can travel back to your longhouse and apply the look of that gear to your character. This could be a piece of armour or a weapon, either primary or secondary, and will mean that your character will always have that look. It's brilliant and means you can still get the stat and ability bonuses of a piece of gear without having to ruin your character's carefully cultivated appearance. There's a very rich RPG system at the core of this game, with proficiencies to perfect and skills to learn, which will help you not only in combat, but during conversations to give you more options in how you direct the story of Rise of the Ronin. Your character will gain experience by tackling missions and challenges, gradually levelling up and improving their health and weapon proficiency, but defeating enemies and completing objectives around the map earn you karma, and when you've earned a certain amount of karma, you can convert that to skill points by interacting with Veiled Edge banners. An additional form of levelling up sees you spending these skill points on abilities with the 4 core areas of strength, dexterity, charm and intellect. While these give you new abilities to play with, they also bump the levels of those core skills, which in turn will affect the effectiveness of your ability to use certain weapons, so tailoring your build around your playstyle is important. It sounds fiddly, but it's actually straightforward when compared to, say, Elden Ring's complex stat system, and the stat tree you'll interact with will become somewhere you'll constantly visit, planning your next upgrade around your playstyle. As with this kind of game, there is also a risk of losing your earned karma on death. If this happens, you'll enter into a vendetta with the enemy that killed you. Kill them and you'll retrieve your lost karma, but die again and it's gone for good. This risk and reward system is obviously very similar to that found in many ARPG games like Dark Souls or even Team Ninja's previous titles, but Rise of the Ronin plays it a lot easier with the ability to cash in that karma for stat points whenever you're near a banner. Keep hold of your karma for longer though, and you'll unlock rare stat points that you can spend on specific high-level skills, so there is definitely a greater depth to be found as well. Rise of the Ronin presents a few online options for the player, both passive and active. The passive options will largely be the ones that you'll be interacting with the most as you encounter other players' characters in your world. These can take the form of wandering Ronin that you can choose to enter into combat with for rewards, although this will have an effect on your character's wanted level and can get you into trouble with the law, as well as captives in enemy encampments that you can free to have them accompany you and clear out the rest of the rabble in the area. You'll also find wandering pilgrim dogs that you can interact with to gain silver coins and random items. The more active online options involve pairing up with players for real-time co-op in missions. As with Team Ninja's previous titles, you can look for assistance at the start of a mission or at any time during by interacting with a Veiled Edge banner, or you can offer your support from a mission menu or at your longhouse. Unfortunately, I was unable to find active online sessions during the review period, likely because other players were too busy tackling the single-player content, but if this is anything like Team Ninja's previous outings, online co-op should be a treat. I'll come back with a video looking at the online in Rise of the Ronin once the game is out and the player base is a little more populated. Rise of the Ronin looks excellent, continuing the visual style set by Nioh and Wolong, but skewing away from the fantasy elements of those games and into a real-world setting. From the rolling hills and bustling city streets to the vivid reds of arterial spray and dismemberments in combat, it gives the player plenty to look at, and while it doesn't necessarily feel like it's pushing the PS5 as much as some other games do, definitely brings that next-gen vibe to the table. There are 3 performance modes on offer, from a straight performance mode which targets 60 FPS to a 30 FPS mode which ups the visual quality and resolution, as well as a ray tracing mode. This RTX mode doesn't really seem to be that beneficial, with the only reflective surfaces for the most part being the puddles strewn around the game world isn't really worth the performance hit. As this is a fast-paced, reaction-based action RPG, the performance mode is, in my opinion, always the better option here, providing a faster frame rate to help react to enemy attacks. While this mostly keeps to a decent 60 FPS, there were some occasional dips in the pre-release version of the game I played. However, I'm hoping that things will be smoothed out in the final release patch. Ben has done a full rundown on the performance modes, and you can check out his video by using the on-screen link. I also want to talk a little bit about accessibility and the game's difficulty, because Rise of the Ronin delivers a fantastic package in this respect that may tempt a few gamers into the fray that are often put off by these so-called hard games. While combat can be tricky and precise, the game offers up a difficulty slider for players to be able to tailor their experience to one that suits them best, sacrificing mission rewards to lower the difficulty, making parries easier and reducing health and ki loss in combat. While many similar games like Elden Ring will provide a wider array of combat options, from magic and ranged to aggressive, strength-focused weapons allowing for brute force encounters, Rise of the Ronin's more focused progression lends itself far better to simply being able to tweak the difficulty. I'm not afraid to say I had to make use of this in an early encounter, dropping the difficulty to the Dawn level to get through a particularly challenging boss fight, before raising it to my favoured Dusk difficulty for the remainder of the game. For those players still struggling at Dawn, however, there are further options to put in play, increasing the amount of health you get back from healing items and reducing ki loss even further, meaning that Rise of the Ronin is a game that feels welcoming to players of all abilities. In addition to a range of accessibility options, there's scope for players to truly tailor the game to their own preferences and needs. The only exception to this I found was setting the spoken language to Japanese, in the thought that this would give a more immersive experience. The main issue I found with this was that I subsequently struggled to obtain certain details from the subtitles in this incredibly richly plotted game, as well as missing details in dialogue that was delivered in the heat of combat. There's also a number of non-Japanese characters in the game who are also dubbed, and this took me largely out of the story, so I quickly found myself swapping back to English audio after a few hours. Rise of the Ronin is to some degree not the game I was expecting it to be. Earlier trailers suggested a game similar to Ghost of Tsushima, but I'd argue that's only partially true. While the setting certainly evokes Sony's superb 2020 open-world action-adventure game, Team Ninja's effort ultimately feels like a rather different beast. Sure, it brings all the usual Team Ninja action RPG elements to the table with its twitchy, fast-paced combat and deep loot and character systems, but it's also a game with a great degree of heart to its story, and a rich open world to explore that's never boring, featuring a world map that undulates between hills and fields, towns, villages and enemy encampments, and frequently gives you something to do and a challenge to overcome. While its scope is arguably a little overwhelming in its early hours and could easily put certain players off, it's a world that you'll very quickly get absorbed into, becoming engaged with the personal and political machinations of the characters you'll interact with. I didn't expect my decisions to play so heavily into the direction of the story, one which is not written in black and white, but broad shades of grey, twisting and turning as alliances are strained and the fate and identity of a nation in flux are tested. Without going into spoilers, the game throws a curveball into the way the narrative progresses several hours into the game, which will likely completely change the player's perspective on how they want to approach the remaining story. Some players may find Rise of the Ronin a little too accessible compared to the likes of Nioh and Wo Long, with its slightly easier to parse combat and varied accessibility options, but I'd argue that's no bad thing. This is a game with a story that touches on ideas of tolerance, equality and changing traditions, and if that also leads to a conscious effort to ensure that more players have a great time in its world, I'm all for it. Not content with merely evolving their formula in line with their contemporaries, Team Ninja have delivered an evolution of their ARPG pedigree, which branches off in interesting and unique ways, balancing its inherent soulsiness with approachability and a world that's easy to get lost in. There's so much to do, and you could easily sink hours of playtime in without even scratching the surface. I was discovering gameplay mechanics late into my time with the game that I completely missed, which changed how I approached certain following missions and encounters. An excellent open-world action RPG for a modern audience, Rise of the Ronin is an easy recommendation for PlayStation 5 owners, and one that will likely bring some new players into the fold of Team Ninja's ARPG formula. We've awarded this 8.5 out of 10. Thanks very much for watching. If you have enjoyed what you've seen, don't forget to drop a like down below and maybe leave us a comment talking about your experiences with Rise of the Ronin. Do get subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, and you may be interested in some of our other upcoming Rise of the Ronin videos. We do have a tech analysis also on the channel, which again is going to be linked on the screen probably about now. But we will see you in our future videos. Bye for now.